Jeff Bullis Show. Today I'm recording from Adelaide in South Australia, which most people haven't heard of. And I'm having a chat today with Tarush Aggarwal. Now, Tarush is currently in India. He sometimes lives in Bali and sometimes he lives in New York. That's what's great about being a digital entrepreneur, is that you can do that sort of shit everywhere. So, Tarush is the founder and CEO of 5X, which offers data reporting as a service, so users can make data-driven decisions faster, which are necessary to succeed. Tarush is also one of the leading experts in leveraging data for exponential growth in the world. Previously as the head of data at WeWork, and we've heard of WeWork, most of us anyway, Tarush has scaled the system to support 12,000 employees as well as 100 data team members. Tarush was also the first data engineer at Salesforce in 2011. Sorry about the cough there.
Okay.
But welcome to the show, Tarush. It's an absolute honour to have you here, and I look forward to finding out your experiences and insights about this digital world we live in and how as entrepreneurs we can actually take advantage of this.
Awesome, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Very, very excited to be here and hopefully add some value to your listeners.
So, Tarush, you're originally from India. You've been to Carnegie Mellon University. You've been also to a university, a summer camp in the University of Melbourne, which is in Australia. Those
Yep.
who heard. You've also spent and worked in Bali, which for those who don't know is just north of Australia, is one of the most popular destinations for Australians. It's this incredibly tropical sort of freewheeling, soulful place where you can actually experience beach, tropics. It's just a fabulous place to be. I've been there once. I want to go back there again. But Tarush spends 6 months of the year, he tells me, there. So, Tarush, let's talk about how you fell in love with data. Where did that idea come from? Like, you got hired by WeWork, you worked at Salesforce. So, how did you fall in love with data and then discovered how important it was?
That's a great question. I like many others, I went to school for computer science and was fortunate enough to get a job at Salesforce.com after graduation. And my first day of work, I very distinctly remember knowing that this is not something I'm going to enjoy. So worked for it for like many years. Finally got there and just realized very, very quickly that holy shit, I made a big mistake. And a big part of that was the playbook on how to do software engineering for the most part was already established. Here's how you do it. Here are the best practices. Here's what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that that's not very important. Obviously, it's super, super, super important that software engineering, that folks are into software engineering, help build new products. It wasn't something I particularly was interested in. And it happened to be a sort of classic case of being at the right place at the right time. Back in 2011, when I started, no one was really talking about data, and no one in the Valley had a data team.
Well,
and I met this
we
product
were just
manager.
we were talking about social media back then.
Yeah, it's sort of social media, Facebook and all of these tools that kind of had, came out in like 2007-ish, right? At least that's when they started to get popular. And what was happening was we were transitioning from having information on our personal computers to having information in the cloud. And because of that, there came this need of how do we analyze and store and sort of query and build analytics on all of this information in the cloud. So, in around 2011, some of these conversations were going on. And it was very, very early in this sort of data sort of landscape. And
Yep.
I was able to, I was introduced to a sort of product manager at Salesforce who was interested in working on this, and two of us partnered on this. And, that was the, early data team at sort of Salesforce, and kind of that's really where it came from. And ever since then, I've sort of never looked back. So been in the data space since since back in since back in 2011. But truth be told, it was just an accident.
Right. Well, I think almost every entrepreneur is an accidental entrepreneur.
I love that.
So we sort of stumble into it. Steven Spielberg says what you should be doing in life will show up as a whisper. It won't shout at you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you heard a whisper, which was I really and I think we need to discover not not just what we love doing, but quite often we only discover that by discovering what we hate doing.
Yeah. Uh, I fully agree. Like, after a, a, a slightly different way of doing it is, I had the opportunity of doing something in the data space a few times over. So I was able to do it at Salesforce and moved ever since. And then, it sort of eventually joined WeWork and sort of now at 5X. And, every time I've moved from like one journey to the other, all I sort of realize I know is not what to do. It's more so what not to do.
Yep.
And the sort of journey of what not to do at like every time is in particular as helpful, if not more than what to do.
Yep. So when you're saying what not to do, is that something you don't enjoy doing?
More so on like, you learned like I've learned from like experiences that, you know, ultimately when you're trying to add value, it's there are like 100 different ways of doing it. And at a particular point we pick one of these ways and we sort of go down deeper. And it's impossible to like look at all of the factors looking forward. But later on when you're able to look backward and kind of figure out what worked, what didn't work, I think very often realizing that you know this might not be the best way to do it, and they kind of has to exist a sort of better way to do it,
Yep.
is often valuable enough because it saves you going down that same rabbit hole again.
So what you're almost saying is it's actually you learn more from the mistakes and what you should be doing because those disasters are revelations quite often, aren't they?
I mean, I think in my experience, it's been quite true, right? Like, I think experience for the most part is knowing what not to do instead of really knowing what to do. It's like knowing what not to avoid is almost, as I said, I think it's like almost more valuable than knowing what to do.
Yeah. Well, you don't learn from pleasure, you only learn from pain. So we're at, you're gone to Salesforce. Tell us a little bit about Salesforce and then we'll move on to the next part of your journey, which was at WeWork. So you started doing data analysis at Salesforce. What was that like?
I mean, at that point, we didn't really have a data team at Salesforce, right? And like obviously Salesforce was still a massive company with over 10,000 employees, and you had all of these different products inside Salesforce, like the
Yep.
Sales Cloud and the Services Cloud, and like the Marketing Suite and like Help Desk and all of these different tools. And you know, one thing which sort of Salesforce was trying to figure out is how are different customers using Salesforce.
Right.
And if you think about it, back then there wasn't a very trivial problem to go figure out. Is how do we segment our users into sort of different categories for every different type of user? How are they using Salesforce? So, what sort of we focused on is actually analyzing log data. So logs was sort of was sort of storing exactly what a customer did inside Salesforce. All of these log files would be shipped over from these application servers into a sort of central hub. We we basically built parsers for that. We used Hadoop to go do this and and extract metrics from logs, and then we'll sort of later able to analyze these metrics and sort of figure out benchmarks. So customers in this industry at this size, on average, are using XYZ features. And that became sort of incredibly helpful for all of the different product owners at Salesforce to go figure out, hey, what's working, what's not working, where can we add some personalization, some sort of customization, and then which kind of features need to be rethought. So this sort of later became the product analytics team at Salesforce, and I'm sure that team today has got hundreds, if not thousands, of engineers.
Right. So I've sort of discovered that initially when you're trying to capture data, it's rather messy. You're trying to work out, so where did this customer come from, if you're talking in a sales and marketing role? Because
Yep.
you've got so many inbound types of sources of data that it's hard to tell where it came from. And the other challenge for us as entrepreneurs is that where was the first click and where was the last click?
Yeah.
So what do you think about that and the challenge? So what you're doing is you're almost starting with, you're collecting data and it's messy.
Yeah. So, it's really interesting, right? Like the average business today has got 10 to 12 different sources of data,
Yep.
right? So, your average small business today has got a sort of backend database. They might have a CRM, they have help desk software, they're using Facebook and Google and LinkedIn. They might have some, online, offline stuff. For
Yep.
sure, they have tons of Google Sheets, and they might be using Zero or or Stripe or Square or some sort of financial tool, right? So that's a, a lot of different data sources. And if you try and get value from these data sources in an ad hoc manner by exporting a data set from one tool to another, by trying to maybe import it inside Salesforce, or sort of trying to build some or like trying to build some like dashboards based on what we have, then it gets very, very complicated very
Yep.
quickly. And all of a sudden it becomes really important what the first click is and what the last click is. And, is this data coming for, how messy is this data? So, in that paradigm of a world, we add so many layers of like complexity. And the fundamental reason for this complexity is we have data coming from different data sources,
Yep.
and data from different data sources got different structures, and it's modeled inside a different way,
Yep.
and it's not modeled in a way to answer a business question. So, what what we're in the middle of right now, which is one of the biggest movements on data, it's called the modern data stack. And what the modern data stack is a set of technologies or a set of tools when sort of joined together, it becomes incredibly easy and powerful to be able to build self-service analytics, to be able to answer all of these sort of to basically answer all of these sort of questions and kind of build recommendations and insights. And the fundamental premise of the modern data stack is being able to extract data from all your different tools,
Right.
from your like 10 to 12 different data sources in an automatic manner, and ingest it into a central warehouse and be able to analyze data over there. And when you're able to really do that and have all of this data going into real time, and then build the analysis later on as a transformational step on top of the raw data,
Yep.
it becomes really easy to build analysis in a very sort of automated, scalable manner. And that's really kind of where the industry is going.
Okay. So let me try and sum that up. Number one, just get the data first. And the number two, make sense of it next.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even about getting the data first, because if you're extracting data from 12 different sources and you're doing it in a sort of manual manner, it's really, really difficult to kind of build on top of, right? So
Yep.
it's in some ways it's like building a sort of skyscraper. And if you're trying to build a skyscraper, you need to go dig up the earth and build some foundation. You can't just
Yeah.
start to build on top of.
Yep.
And I think the biggest mistake companies make today is they focus on answering questions upfront, which without building a sort of foundation. And that foundation is more about automation, is being able to ingest these data sources automatically to then build out reporting on top of that. But if you try to just go build out ad hoc analysis, that's like, having cement and sort of concrete and sort of building up and down. Very soon you might add 2 3 layers, but you're not going to be able to go build a skyscraper.
So what you need to do is you need to build a strong foundation and framework first. Is that correct?
Exactly. So, you might have heard of, vendors like Snowflake and sort of Tableau, which are, a
Yep.
few of like the data vendors. What sort of Snowflake? Uh, Snowflake was the largest IPO in tech history, and it happened to be a data company. But in the modern data stack movement, it's just one layer. It's, one of like 5 layers you need to go build your first analysis. So, the sort of layers are data collection, ingestion, storage, which is what Snowflake is. On top of that, you have data modeling. On top of that, you have reporting. So there are 5 different layers. And really what I call this is the sort of foundation. If you don't have, these very, very foundational layers, that's like trying to build a skyscraper without digging up the earth and building a foundation.
Okay, cool. So you're at Salesforce, and you obviously learned a lot there. What was the biggest insight you had at Salesforce before we move on and talk about WeWork?
um I mean, at Salesforce, things were just getting interesting because, I think by the end of it, we sort of, you know by the end, I joined Salesforce as a software engineer, and I sort of ended my stint at Salesforce as a data engineer. And that was, the very infancy of this new title of data engineers, of like data scientists. So I think
Yep.
by the end of Salesforce, we knew that this data thing is sort of going somewhere. And all of a sudden it became really interesting to see what's going to happen over the next few years.
Yeah, so what you're doing is you're noticing a momentum, a, um, a data momentum.
Exactly.
So from that, you made a move then to WeWork. How did that happen?
um, in between, there was a smaller company I was part of. It happened because a part of me also wanted to live in New York, and all my friends were living there, and I decided to go live in New York for a few years. And just as I was getting ready to move back into San Francisco, obviously WeWork magically sort of showed up. And I still remember walking into the office for the first time and just feeling this, intense energy, which was like nothing I'd ever felt before inside corporate Silicon Valley, or,
Right.
or sort of corporate New York. And I knew right then and then there was something special. And at that time, we were, had a very, very small data team. There was, a 2 3 person data team. And I think for me at that point, I sort of was just very um, on the same page on the mission, sort of WeWork was sort of up to. And I sort of decided very soon that that's what I was interested in doing.
Right. So you start at WeWork, because WeWork's an interesting company in that it's renting an office and then sub-renting it out to independent freelancers, entrepreneurs, startups, and so on. WeWork's had an interesting journey in terms of huge, but then blew up as well. So we involved in sort of that. You felt the energy, which is true about startups. It's like there's this energy, and it's all working, it's all pumping, it's growing, it's going fast. Um, so, how long were you at WeWork, and what did you learn from WeWork?
I was at WeWork for over 3.5 years. It was one of the most exciting journeys to be part of something which is being built so quickly. And I think, very, I'm extremely grateful for my time over there. Met some incredible people who are still advisors, friends, mentors till date. So I have nothing but nice things to say about my time over there. And, I think a lot of my learnings over there came from really sort of learning how to scale things up in a sort of extremely fast manner.
Yep.
And also, I think the sort of WeWork data challenges were really interesting because, it was one of the first few companies which had both online and offline
Yep.
data sources. I sort of mentioned that the average startup today has got between 10 to 12 different sources of data. At WeWork, we had 100.
Right.
And we sort of had 100 pretty quickly, right? So, being able to build out data capabilities at a company of that size was a non-trivial task, and the sort of learnings that came along with it were also, are pretty fundamental in sort of how 5x looks at the world, and how we um, want to build and scale products.
Okay. So you went from a software engineer to a data engineer at Salesforce because you realised that being a software engineer just was something you hated doing, but you discovered something that you love doing, which is data engineering. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I've worn many hats in my career in the data world, but the one I did start with was sort of data engineering.
Okay. So you're at WeWork, and obviously an idea or an opportunity came up to start and do your own thing. Was that an aha moment for you? Like, I've been doing this for other people. Is it? It's time to do it for myself, and you came up with an idea how to do that. How did that happen?
It didn't come up, and it
Hit
didn't
me in
come
the
up
face.
anything like that. Towards my end of my WeWork stint, I moved to China with WeWork to go focus on WeWork's platform efforts in China. What sort of China is a completely different animal. If you want to be successful in China, you have to build on the China cloud. Amazon and Google aren't really very prevalent in
Mm.
China, so you have to build on like Ali Cloud, and you have to rebuild things in a certain different way. And WeWork was very interested in the China market. To put in context, WeWork only entered cities with more than 1 million people.
Mm-hmm.
America had 14, China had 108. So that's how big the opportunity was in China for WeWork. And you know, as they were getting started with this, um, w- you know, the WeWork IPO started to fail. And when that happened, a lot of the leaders were sort of called back to America. At that point, I had no interest in moving back to America. So I decided to go on a 10-day vacation to Bali, and that happened to be day one of COVID. And as soon as I get to Bali, very quickly the sort of borders lock up. I can't go back to China, and I'm there with a small handbag. And I sort of proceeded to spend 2 years over there. I sort of uh, helped with some transitions at WeWork, but weaned myself off the business. I took a few months off, and you know it was a very creative time in my life where I got to double down on a lot of like personal pursuits, which I just hadn't had the time to do. Sort of spending 10 years in Silicon Valley and in New York. And, this journey ultimately led me to form 5X, which really came from, you know, it really came from the fact that in the next 5 or 10 years, every company is going to be a lot more data driven, right? Like just like 10 years ago, no one was doing digital marketing. Today, every company is doing it. In the next 5 to 10 years, every company is going to be on the modern data stack and is going to be a lot more data driven. And unfortunately, 90% of businesses are not going to hire 50 data engineers like Salesforce and WeWork,
Yep.
but 90% of businesses need to be data driven. So I basically started 5X to help 90% of businesses have the same insights and recommendations and sort of analytics as like companies like WeWork and Salesforce in a much more effective and sort of scalable manner.
Okay, because so what you're saying is that 5x can help companies outsource their data analytics and collection because they won't be able to afford to have 15, 20 data engineers. So you're helping
Yeah,
companies get insights quickly about data without actually having to hire data engineers but outsource that expertise to you guys. Is that correct?
we don't outsource.
No, no,
So
they're
what
outsourcing to you.
No, so what fundamentally 5x is we are a sort of platform where the most important things if you do want to get if you want to get any insights from your data, as I said, you need to set up the you first need to have the foundation. And
Okay.
if a business wants to go do it today, they need to go to each of these five vendors. Each of them is a sort of $1 billion vendor, right? And you have to go sign an enterprise contract and you have to go stitch it together. And that takes months. And you now have these multiple enterprise contracts you have to manage. 5x is the first company which like stitches together the modern data stack and sort of gives it to you as a service. So on day one, you have all of the different vendors. You don't have to worry about enterprise contract. You get one monthly bill based on how much you use. So, on day one itself, you have that that entire foundation which I was mentioning. Now, you can choose to go operate this yourself, and you not sort of now you have the foundation. You can choose to build the analysis on top of this if you want, and a lot of companies do that. But if you don't have that expertise, what we also do is we give access to really smart qualified engineers. So at the moment, we probably interview about a sort of 1,000 engineers a week, all in 9 countries. We can go hire the top 0.2% of these engineers. We can then pre-train them on the platform because we know exactly what the platform is. And now we have some extremely sort of qualified engineers. What we can do is give you access to them, and you can embed these engineers into your teams, and you can build out analytics, dashboards, reporting, insights. So we don't actually you aren't outsourcing any work to 5x. You're using the sort of 5x platform to, number one, build your foundations, and then if you need to gain access to basically high quality talent.
Okay.
Does that
So
make sense?
okay. So the next thing I'm going to ask you is, can you sum up what 5x does in one sentence?
Yeah, absolutely. So 5x is an end-to-end data platform built on top of the best-in-class vendors on the modern data stack.
Okay. And how do you help businesses?
Um, Businesses using 5x can implement entire data strategies in weeks, not years.
Right. So they can use you guys to actually make sense of data about their market that helps them actually make more money. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Cool. So how long's 5x been running now?
We're 9 months old.
Right.
Uh,
And how many is it a monthly subscription product? How does it work?
yeah, so, you know, so there are two pieces at 5x, right? The first piece is the platform, which is all of these different tools needed in order to get to insights. The way that works is, you pay as you go. So, at the end of the month, if you've used tool, if you've consumed a sort of 100 credits of a tool, you get a bill of 100 credits, right? So it's the same thing. There's no, instead of signing an enterprise contract, you just pay as you go. So, the sort of best way to think about it is for an early stage business, your monthly bill, if you don't have any absurd amount of data, should be a few $100 a month, just depending on how much you use, right? So that's the first piece of it. And the sort of second piece is the access to talent piece. Now, in America, or even in parts of Australia, talent is really expensive, right? A sort of full-time data engineer costs over $150,000. If you have to really get to analytics or insights, you're sort of looking at sort of two engineers, 6 months to 1 year. So the average entry point into doing data today is pretty close to $500,000.
Right.
Whereas in 5x, you can do this in weeks at a much lower cost. So our talent, what we call these engineering pods, which is access to a sort of group of engineers, starts at about $5,000-6,000 a month, which means you can implement an end-to-end data strategy in sort of 50 to 100 grand, which is 5-6 times cheaper than sort of getting started from scratch, and it's like at least 10 times faster than if you had to go do it yourself.
Okay. So what's your, I suppose, sweet spot as a target company?
So you know today our smallest companies are companies that are pre-product, so they haven't even launched the product, they have no data, but they know that when they do launch, they're very interested in it.
Yep.
And our largest customers are banks or like public companies, right? So we have clients all across the board. I would say our sweet spot is really your mid-market, sort of companies that are growing very quickly. They want to move and scale extremely quickly, and they know that one of the core ways they're going to be able to do that is by having the right sort of data strategies.
Right. Okay.
So, put another way, it's no longer companies. It's not companies who haven't figured out zero to one, but when you have that product market fit, and now when you're looking to accelerate growth, that's when 5x is extremely relevant.
In other words, you're not a startup. You're more a someone who's already worked out what their customer is. They're already getting traction. Now you just need to make more sense of the data that your customers are giving you.
In some ways, like all of these tactics, right? Like even like ads, right? A lot of early stage companies are sort of focusing on ads, and the thing about ads is like putting gasoline on a fire.
Yep.
If you do that, it's gonna it's gonna accelerate, but you need to have a fire first, right? And in the same way with data, like all of these things are extremely relevant once you know that you have product market fit, that that you have an actual business and you have figured it out. Once you kind of have that and you use, sort of, and you're able to use data and analytics to accelerate your growth, that's when things become sort of really powerful.
Yep.
So
Okay.
that's how we look at it.
So what's the future for 5x? You think you're 9 months in. How many customers do you have? You don't have to tell me that, but where do you see yourselves going from here? Is it doing more enterprise style data? How does it look for you?
Yeah. So, we are very interested in becoming this single platform across the modern data stack, right? So we know that the modern data stack movement has become mainstream. Every company is going to have, a sort of version of the stack in the next few
Yep.
years. We want to be that single platform across the modern data stack, which allows you to, implement this inside your business. So, in the next few months, anyone will be able to go to 5x, uh, will be able to go to 5x, enter their own credit card, and you'll have this sort of modern data stack uh, up and running, your own version of it, with one monthly bill. So, it'll become 100% self-service, which means that, we will be able to have hundreds, thousands of, of sort of businesses use us at a monthly level. And in terms of where we want to go, as I kind of said, um, we in some ways want to be the Google Analytics of the modern data stack. And the sort of reason we say Google Analytics is that, in the old world, if you had a website, you would probably have Google Analytics. It sort of helps you figure out where your customers are coming from, how much time they're spending, which features are they using, which features are they not using. In the new world where you have multiple different data sources, Google Analytics is not, as sort of relevant as it once used to be. We want to be the sort of next Google Analytics built for the modern data stack.
Okay. So let me ask you a question about that then. Is you're providing analytics. Are you helping people actually make sense of the analytics so they actually can make more money?
Yeah, absolutely. So, no one is doing data for the sake of doing data and,
No,
and
that's
for actually getting analytics, right? It's always as a means to optimize the business. Now, today, the sort of sad truth is that even if a company has this $500,000 and goes and signs all these different layers of the stack and hires these sort of data engineers, chances are that these companies don't speak data engineering and these data engineers don't speak company.
that's
So
right.
there's a big translation gap over there. Now, how we solve this is we have this layer on top of just the engineers, and we call this our project management layer. And think of these people as, early employees of companies like Uber and WeWork and Salesforce and sort of Spotify, where they've really been at the early teams. They've seen these companies grow. They know how to talk to executives. They know how to translate generic business requirements into insights and sort of recommendations. And you know when you decide that if you need help with this sort of talent piece of it, you get access to these people. And the way it works is you have these 1 week sprints where we work in 1 week sprints. Here's what we did, here's what we will do, here's what we need from you. And these people are sort of there to, in some ways, act like that translator, be able
Right.
to take your generic requirements and convert them into actionable insights, which the business can then implement.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the entrepreneur wants to have actionable insights to help him actually uh, cr- get more leads
Yeah.
and get more
I mean, all
customers.
companies care about is sort of three main things. Number one is, how do we get more customers? Number
Yep.
two is, how do we keep these customers engaged? So how do we decrease churn? And number three is, how do we optimize the business, or how do we decrease our costs? Those
Okay.
are, the three broad areas which sort of companies care about. And those three areas are sort of what we start with.
Okay. So 5x uses data to meet all those three areas.
Yes.
Cool. That sounds like something worth doing.
Thank you.
So just as we're about to wrap up, um, what's one or two top tips you would like to share? Actually, I want to ask you something else, frankly. We talked, initial discussions and what we shared was um, almost every company is becoming a data company now.
Yeah.
Because you can sell data. You're going, okay, I have a database of 10,000 customers. They are all 25 to 30 years old, or these are my top three demographics. Um, so before we get to sharing what are your top tips, how can a company become a data company in a modern world? We used to talk about being a social media company, which is actually less important now. So how
Yeah.
can we become a data company and collect the right data and use that data to grow our business?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, so the sort of reality of it is, this does not happen overnight, right? Like you can't decide, I want to do this, and sort of tomorrow you're going to be a data company. It takes a few iterations, right? And you know if 5 years ago, very few companies were doing digital marketing, right? Like maybe like 10 years ago, no one had a website. And Google came along and told you that if you don't have a website, you won't exist 10 years from now. And like today, that's
Yep.
so true. If you don't have a website, if you don't care about your online branding, you probably don't exist. Now, in the next 5 or 10 years, use cases like where are your customers coming from? What are your different segments of users? What's your average lifetime value? How do you personalize your app for your different segments? How do you use analytics to sort of figure out who your best sales reps are? How do you use this to go figure out supply chain? These are the types of use cases. If you don't get very good in the next 5 years, you just won't be able to compete because your competition will be doing this.
Yeah.
So, the way we look at it is in sort of going back to answer your third question, what's the biggest tip? The biggest tip is go get started because it's not going to happen overnight. And the whole mindset of a sort of founder thinking they're sitting on top of a sort of gold mine of data and they're just waiting to hire one data scientist to go
Yeah.
mine this data and sort of come up with these amazing insights. That's not how it really works. Like you can't you might be sitting on an amazing plot, an amazing plot of land, but you're a few years away from like activating and like building a skyscraper. And if you don't get started right now, you're just going to be left behind because we can see this. We just have enough data to sort of see this right now that there are enough companies where sort of data might not be core to their business. I'm talking about like real estate companies or like education companies or like cryptocurrencies or like, you know, you name it. Like, we are sort of engaging with all of them. And, they're extremely interested in not playing a sort of 2 month game, but they're interested in playing what happens in the next 6 months and what can you do, which, allows us to out execute our competition. So, I think the number one kind of tip is go get started because if you don't, that's um,
Yep.
an extinction level event coming up. And I think number two is this idea of like I'm gonna go hire a sort of analyst and go build some and sort of go build some like ad hoc dashboards, and that's kind of enough. That's like using that analogy that I want to do marketing and it's enough to go, you know, build an Instagram account and make some posts, right? The sort of reality of it is like that time when you can do marketing with a few Instagram posts is sort of long gone.
Yep.
And the same analogy that you can go hire a sort of analyst and build some dashboards, and that's going to make you data driven, is probably is also long gone.
Yeah. In other words, play the long game and then use a service like 5x to do it for you rather than just wasting money on just one freelancer or a data engineer. That's going to cost a lot of money, and they won't have the expertise either across the board. So you've got this expertise across the board, right? That allows you to provide a whole range of insights that will help companies grow and scale.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to use 5x, but if you're interested in sort of chatting, we would love to chat. But um, I think just getting started in data is, if there's anything you probably want to take away from this, it would be like
Yep.
go get started. And hiring an analyst is like not the right way of getting started.
Okay. So let's get to the nub of it then. I totally agree with you. Let's get started.
Yeah.
And I've just launched a new product and we're collecting data, but it's a bit messy at the moment. So how do you get started? What should you be doing? What the fundamentals of starting to collect data.
Yeah. So, I would look at it in like phase one and phase two, right? In the
Okay.
first phase, it's really how do we get to this concept of self-service analytics such that, anyone in the company which has got a reasonable question can answer this themselves in a few clicks. So what kind of needs to happen for sort of self-service analytics? Number one, as I said earlier, we have like 10 to 12 different data sources. How do we, in an automated manner, ingest this data from these 10 to 12 different
Yep.
data sources into a central warehouse? How do we then model it, structure it, clean it, and build a clean business layer, which is structured in a way to answer business questions? And then how do we have some sort of BI tool on top of it, which allows us to like slice, dice, answer these questions in a self-service manner, right?
Yep.
Kind of that's really like phase one, right? So initially your core metrics are around what percentage of important questions do I have, which I can answer myself without waiting on like 1 week for an analyst or someone on the data team to
Yep.
answer that. Phase one. Now, kind of when you have that, now you sort of get to like play around with more advanced capabilities. How do I take this data and kind of make decisions on it? Can we have sort of intelligence to actually tell us which cities to focus on, and sort of what price point should we go after and which campaigns to avoid?
Yep.
Can we take this data and push it back into other tools, like push it back into our sort of marketing automation tool, or take some of these insights and sort of push it back inside Salesforce, or sort of can we use some of these insights which we're getting to build customer dashboards so that our customers get better insights into how they're using our product, actually
Hmm.
get sort of recommendations on top of that. So there are like 5-10 different you know areas which you can kind of focus on, but it really starts off with the first kind of phase is self-service analytics built inside an automated manner,
Right.
and like from there things get really interesting.
Okay. And this, I think, a lot of companies are struggling with this. How do I build? How do I use analytics in a very clever and efficient way?
Yep. I mean, I think, what I kind of just sort of gave you is a very kind of actionable way of doing it, right? It sort of focus on what your ultimate end goal is. And for phase one, your end goal is self-service analytics, which is, a pretty actionable insight instead of, talking about, hey, do I need this one tool, or, do I need a warehouse or ingestion tool? The goal is, something pretty actionable. And I think self-service analytics or sort of self-service reporting is your first actionable phase.
And the second one again? So the second phase?
After that, things get more sort of advanced, right? So then it kind of the business, like, is something like, being able to push intelligence into other different tools. Is there a chance we can push these intelligence into sort of other tools, other areas like managing your sort of lineage, right? What's going to happen is you're going to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sort of data sets, and are you kind of able to figure out which ones are the ones which are important, which ones are like joined from others? If one job fails, what's the upstream and downstream sort of dependencies? um, increasingly more stuff around AI and sort of ML, which are you able to predict insights and sort of recommendations ahead of time? So the downstream dependent, or the sort of once you have the core analytics, what you can start doing after that, that's just becoming broader and broader every day with all of these new categories coming.
So what you're really saying is start with the right foundation and fundamentals,
Yeah,
which is what you guys provide as a service, and then play the long game, and then use that to actually grow and scale your company.
absolutely.
Cool. Tarush, has been an absolute fabulous experience to hear your insights. A lot of what we've talked about today is going to blow most people's minds and will slightly confuse them, maybe. Because a lot of companies are, still trying to escape analog and trying to get into digital. And, people are still struggling with social media, 13, 14 years later. So, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge. It's great to see you launching 5X, and I look forward to catching up with you maybe in Bali one day.
I would love that, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me in the show, and hopefully we were able to add some value to your listeners.
I'm sure we will. And how do they find you, Tarush?
Our website is 5x.co. Again, that's 5x.co.
Yep.
You can reach out to us at hello@5x.co. You can reach out directly to me at Tarush, Tarush, or just T at 5x.co.
Great. Thanks, Tarush. and it's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the show.